Hello, and welcome to an Act4RED podcast celebrating Rare Disease Day 2026. My name is Avril Daly, and I'm the CEO of Retina International. So what is Act4RED? Act4RED is acting for rare eye diseases, and it is a joint initiative of the ERN EYE, representing clinicians and researchers and patient organisations, including Retina International, Foundation Fighting Blindness, and the Ocular Diseases Forum in the United States. And all of those involved in the rare disease community, and particularly the rare eye disease community all over the world. What we are trying to do is drive evidence-based, patient-centred actions that improve access to diagnosis, to care, and to innovation for people living with all forms of rare eye disease, wherever they are based in the world. We are collectively calling to stop the loss of vision and are working to improve outcomes for people affected by inherited retinal degenerations, anterior segment disorders, neuro ophthalmic conditions, and paediatric rare eye diseases. Act4RED focuses on preserving vision by generating strong evidence and using it to demonstrate the high unmet need of this community, while raising awareness and understanding among decision makers across health ministries, research bodies, and regulators in particular. The initiative ensures that the unique needs of the patient community shape policy, research, and care pathways. We also want to underscore the importance of fit-for-purpose indicators, meaningful outcome measures, and embedding patient experiences and values in the development of, as well as the evaluation of new therapies and new innovations that are designed to improve lives. Bringing together researchers, clinicians, and patients, Act4RED will amplify the need for coordinated policy action at above country level and will drive solutions that can genuinely improve the lives of people living with rare eye diseases. So today, I am delighted to be joined by Professor Hélène Dollfus, who is the coordinator of ERN EYE. Hélène is the Professor of Ophthalmology and Genetics at Strasbourg University in France. Professor Bart Leroy, who is an ophthalmologist and clinical geneticist at the Department of Ophthalmology in Ghent University Hospital in Belgium. And Professor David Keegan, who is a consultant ophthalmologist and retinal specialist at the Mater Hospital in Dublin. So all of you are very, very welcome today on this podcast. And today's a real opportunity for us to discuss what we believe we can achieve through Act4RED and why this initiative has been undertaken in the first place. So as coordinator of ERN EYE, Hélène, maybe over to you. What do you think that Act4RED can achieve?
So first of all, Act4RED represents, as you said, all rare eye diseases. And we are quite emblematic of the field of rare diseases overall. And if I take the example of inherited retinal dystrophies, this really shows that rare diseases can be extremely complex because there are a lot of different clinical types, a lot of different genes implied, and that the understanding of why the retina is progressively degenerating is still to be completely understood. However, there has been a huge amount of research that has enabled progress in diagnosis, genomics with diagnosis, and bringing diagnosis to more than 50% of the patients. But there are still 50% of patients who are awaiting for a genetic diagnosis. And on the other hand, there has also been a lot of progress in understanding on the biological side why the retinal cells degenerate. And this is very important to bring novel therapies to the patients. However, around the table here, we are clinicians and we are also patient advocates. And we know that the patients we meet every day, they are losing their sight. And it can be children, it can be adults. And there is a real unmet need to try to stop the loss and even cure these patients. So, as you know, there have and there are still, of course, trials. And we have faced challenges around these trials that can be promising and bringing hope to patients. But I would like then to ask Bart Leroy, my colleague from Belgium, about the challenges we have faced and the patient community around trying to bring therapies to patients. Bart, what do you think?
Well, thank you, Hélène. And I agree that we have to work hard to stop the loss. And so when we think about the RP65 gene, which was originally discovered in 1994, and in 1997, Christian Avril from Montpellier in France showed that this was at the basis of RP65 inherited retinal disease, or RP65 IRD. It took until 2017 for us to get enough information to show that a gene therapy, the first gene therapy for inherited retinal diseases, was efficacious. It was approved by Food and Drug Administration in 2017 to be marketed in the US from 2018 onwards. In 2018, it was approved by the European Medicines Agency, and the first people were treated in France, in Paris in 2019. Now that in 2026 is 7 years ago, and since we haven't had any other treatments approved for treatment for IRDs. Inherited retinal diseases come in multiple variations, and we need to develop treatments, and we are developing treatments. But what is proven to be enormously difficult is to show enough proof using outcome measures, ways to actually prove that something makes a difference in the activities of daily living for patients, using those outcome measures that aren't currently known in the world of ophthalmology hasn't been a smooth ride, in the sense that if we look at more common diseases generally, like, for example, age-related macular degeneration with new blood vessel formation under the retina, if we inject an anti-vascular endothelial growth factor drug, the best corrected visual acuity, so central vision, shoots up generally quite significantly. That is not the case in IRDs. And so we are currently faced with a couple of trials that have not been successful, mostly not because the product doesn't seem to work. It does seem to do something for patients, but we've had real difficulties in proving in a sufficient way to regulators that these drugs do make a difference. And that's where we started the Act4RED initiative. We started discussing, and I'd love to pass on to David to discuss in a little bit more detail what we've been doing as a group. And so, David, maybe you can pick up there.
Thank you, Bart, and thank you, Hélène, for really laying out what our challenges are and what we're looking to do. So you've touched on a couple of points already. The rarity of the disorders and the diseases that we deal with. So that provides challenges in performing, good, valid natural history data to get that together, and performing clinical trials of sufficient patient numbers to show significant impact of a therapy or a treatment. So the rarity of the conditions, but also the heterogeneity of the conditions, the many, many different genes that cause just rare retinal disease, and even within those genes that they cause different disorders and different problems for patients. So as Bart points out, when we take historic clinical trials in ophthalmology, be it cataract surgery or anti-VEGF agents like Bart has talked about, they have common conditions with a very specific mechanism of action of these drugs where the vision improves. So you have a significant physiological improvement that meets all the old style standards on behalf of the regulatory authorities. When we go to treat these rare eye conditions with effective agents, because they've been proven in phase 1 and phase 2 studies, and to an extent in phase 3, it's more difficult to demonstrate that physiological jump in acuity, which we talk about, or visual field, which we can measure. So we really then start to look at, well, what's the impact on the patient, the person themselves. And this is important in our discussions with the regulatory authorities, is to how do we quantify or how do we capture the meaningful nature of an intervention that we might do on the condition has such an impact in their lives. Because it varies in the condition. A condition like Stargardt disease, central visual acuity is affected. Retinitis pigmentosa, classically, your peripheral vision is affected. Or you take another condition like achromatopsia, all rare retinal diseases, but in achromatopsia, glare, that real sense of being troubled by bright light is what's meaningful to those patients. So we've a challenge the clinicians and the researchers about tackling those conditions to have a meaningful impact on those symptoms that are bothersome for patients. So this initiative is closing the gap in that understanding between what the patients are experiencing, what the clinicians and researchers are trying to fix, and what the regulatory authorities are looking to approve and allow into the market. Because they're charged with safety and then efficacy and then laterally cost effectiveness. That's their journey. So we hope through this initiative of our consortium and our collaboration, we can engage meaningfully with the regulatory agencies. Say, what are they looking for us to deliver? They have to be reasonable because we're dealing with rare, heterogeneous conditions, and we think we've got viable therapies. So that's Act4RED, and that's why we're campaigning around Stop the Loss. Any of us looking after patients with a condition, all the patients would love a cure and a reverse. But the concern, the anxiety, the impact on psychological well-being is knowing the unstoppable ongoing degeneration. So let's start with stopping the loss.
Yes, and I think this is a really important point because coming from the perspective of patients who are living with these conditions and their families, there's so much hope, that is derived from the research. I mean, we see so much potential, so many clinical trials. You hear about these innovative approaches towards the delivery of therapies, and really kind of futuristic, in many ways. But here, present, things like gene therapy, cell therapies, all of these, offer so much hope. But then we hear, okay, so patients and their communities have invested in, have supported research for many, many years. And now that we get to this point, we're starting to realize, well, actually, there's a problem in understanding these conditions. There's a real problem. So from your perspective as clinicians, and those of you've all been involved in clinical trials and development and understand the real problems that, prevent us getting from that clinical trial phase, that translational phase through the regulatory process, how would you ask, and this is to all of you, what can patients do in the first instance? What can the patient community do to support the raising awareness for one thing, but support the initiatives that can really change the perception of vision loss and understanding of the need? How can patients get more involved in that?
I would say that our initiative follows finally a certain amount of disappointment after the trials that were stopped, and following a very time of huge excitement with the therapy for RP65 gene. So I think our initiative here, and this includes also, of course, the patients, is communication. This is really key. We have to understand each other. We have to understand the patient needs. We have to understand also the needs of the regulators, as David just said. But also we have to understand what we have to achieve in the research part, and also what are exactly the points where we can improve. And these four communities, researchers, clinicians, patients, regulators, we have to speak to each other. And this is really the major point, I would say, is to listen to the voice of the patients, of course, and also understand better what is expected from the other sides. This is what I believe.
Yeah, I fully agree, Hélène. I think, as David was saying earlier, it's incredibly important to understand one another. And so I've learned an awful lot as a specialist in genetic eye diseases from my patients, and I do every day, in the sense that people who go through the experience of having such a condition, they tell me what they can and what they cannot do. They tell me about how they go about, what adaptations in their lives make a difference. And so I regularly ask patients, what do you want? What would be good enough? And so I've asked many people, including yourselves, Avril, what is enough? What would you agree with if we were to be able to deliver a treatment? And you've often told me, like, if stabilization would be an option, given a certain treatment is applied, you'd be happy to sign on the dotted line. And I think that obviously improvement would be an even better outcome. But I think what patients can do is help us, be our guides as to where you want us to go. I think that you have an incredible role to play in educating the regulators, because regulators are people who are trained, for example, in ophthalmology as ophthalmologists. They look at all kinds of protocols and results from studies, but how would they know about every disease?
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
know about every disease. So I think that it's important that patients get an emancipated role in helping everyone in the whole discussion understand where you would be content or what you would be content with. And I think so, educating regulators, educating IRD experts, and then this advocacy should also go to the general public, because the general public pays for quite expensive treatments that are to be applied in the case of rare eye diseases. And so, can we pay with the systems that we have in our countries in Europe? Yes, we can. And so the public needs to be educated and needs to be able to support our goals as well. And I'm sure that David has quite a few other ideas on top of what we've said.
Bart, really to agree with yourself and Hélène, and really I'm just sort of thinking about a summary, Avril, in that is that patients share their stories. Patients must share their stories, not just with each other, not just with their clinicians in the clinical room, which should be a safe space for them to experience all the frustrations of living with a rare eye disease, but when comfortable, share their stories broadly with the public. Secondly, to be involved in research initiatives as public and patient representatives. Involvement, the PPI is crucial. It guides the meaningful nature of our work that we do, and then participate on the patient panels with the regulatory bodies. The regulatory bodies will listen to patients because that's who they're charged with looking after, protecting, making sure they got something efficacious for them and something that's cost effective. So there are three very strong areas. If I could add one extra point on to what Hélène and Bart have already said, is regulators and the broader population, the public, taxpaying public, we need to get clarity. So, and again, we go back to the heterogeneity of rare eye disease. So it's hard to achieve clarity when the public are getting maybe 20 or 40 different stories that have a bit of a nuanced, different meaning to them. So I would ask the patient organizations to gather those stories together under those broad themes and really highlight, in amongst all that heterogeneity of rare eye disease, there are common needs, there are common wishes, and that's what they want us as clinicians and professionals and researchers to work to deliver for them, but also that the regulators understand that this is what's meaningful for patients, and then act on that and work with us to deliver them.
Yes, and I think we know from various events that we've been to together and separately, when you talk to patients about the fact that, you know, they're so hopeful about the research, as I've said earlier, and then they find out that the measurement of success of a therapy may not be something that they thought was useful, or they thought was going to be relevant to them, or the idea and the notion that's preventing further vision loss is not good enough is shocking to patients. And, as you say, David, the more people hear about that reality, the more maybe decision makers will understand that, there's a massive difference in understanding that your vision can be preserved at any stage throughout the process of degeneration, because of course we are talking about degenerative diseases here, and they affect people in different ways and at different ages and stages, and it is a complex space, absolutely, for sure. But, as you say, Bart, and we've had this conversation, that, many people you will speak to from the patient community, if they were told that their vision could be preserved, will say that that's absolute magic to them. That's incredible to them, and it's to understand those stories, I suppose, is what you're saying, but also to be able to work on ensuring that they're not just stories, that they mean something. These are statistics, these are reality, these can be translated into scientific terminologies that can influence decisions and support actions. And I think that's something that is important for patients to understand, and they do. And we know from our community in Retina International, at a global level, there's more and more patients wanting to become involved and ensure that these stories are told, and that perspective is being brought to bear on the agencies and the decision-making forums where they need to be. But I mean, just to kind of finish up, and we know that Act4RED is really about raising awareness among the broader stakeholders, engaging patients in decisions that will be made about them. But from your perspective, if you had one thing to say to a regulator, on Rare Disease Day 2026, when it comes to the issue of this very complex space within rare eye diseases, this high unmet need, what would it be? And I might start with yourself, Hélène.
What I would like to raise above all is to have a European perspective, and to see that there is equity on the access for trials for patients with rare eye diseases. To be able to imagine that we will have one day transnational trials, I think this is highly important. And also access in all the EU countries to the treatment, because this is not the case yet. And for not only so access to trials, but also access to treatment that are on the market. So yeah, that would be the awareness I would like to be raised by the patients to facilitate really this access.
Bart, the same question to you.
I'd say two things. One, building on what Hélène has been saying, if there's two messages I can bring to Rare Disease Day and to regulators, for that matter, is we need Europeans to be able to access even molecular screening. So everybody, I always talk about the right to know your genotype. And I really mean that. If you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to know the background of your condition, that is your genotype, that explains your phenotype, the way that the condition presents itself in you, then you ought to be able to access such a service. And so molecular analysis is available in Ireland, it's available in Belgium, it's available in France, in Germany, in England, in quite a few countries. But there are countries, for example, Greece, which is a fairly top quality country, where you cannot access easily molecular screening. So it's certainly not reimbursed by the community, by the National Health Service. And so I would say I advocate for people to be able to know their genotype. They have the right to know their genotype, and it should be across Europe. The second thing I would say is briefly, a rare eye disease is very unlike a common eye disease in multiple aspects: the way it presents itself, the total number of patients, and the achievements one can get from genetic therapies. So gene therapy is only going to be able to get you to a certain level of function. It's not necessarily going to be able to bring a person who's never seen a 3:10 vision to 10:10 vision. That's just impossible because there are many aspects of those conditions that are very different from people who have more common diseases and who from the outset often have had normal vision. So rare eye diseases are very unlike common eye diseases. That's my point.
Yes, absolutely. And David, what would your message be?
Yeah, very similar to Bart, but to build on that is really to work with us. Work with us. Their job is to act in the interests of the population of Europe for the EMA, the US for the FDA. That's our job also. So we're on the same team working for patients, but work closer with us to help identify those therapies that are effective that we can bring. So transnational trials, rare diseases, small trial numbers that we can do that. There are other innovative ways about accelerating the trial process and doing it safely. And that's again through collaborations, consortiums, and scaling up activity in particular sites. But you have a constant iterative ongoing dialogue so we can get these therapies that are effective to patients in a timely manner. And it's a continuum. We may not have a blockbuster drug to treat all rare eye diseases in the next 5 or 10 years, but we will make incremental changes, improvements. And that's important for patients suffering with rare eye disease now. That we can't, the three of us, and Avril include yourself, have been in this space and for over 30 years working around this. And we know it's a continuum. Bart alluded to that earlier on about RP65 discovery as a key part of the whole light cycle and how vision happens. And 20 years later, we've got a gene therapy. So iterative, the communication has to be ongoing. The patients have to be embedded right at the center of it, but listen meaningfully to the patients who are affected with rare eye disease.
Thank you very much. And just to thank you for working with us as patient organizations, and Retina International represents, a lot of global organizations, a lot of national organizations who are working in different areas of retinal disease, disease-specific and national organizations of all different shapes and sizes, but are very conscious of our colleagues in other areas of rare disease that affect other parts of the eye who have similar issues. The challenges of not quite understanding the complexity of these diseases, that they're not the same as common diseases, that they need to be viewed through a different lens, if you pardon the pun on that. But, it is true, we all of us share common challenges within the complexity of this condition, and the perception around rare eye diseases not being what it could or should be. And I think through collaboration like this and working together across different rare eye disease areas and specialities and different countries and competences can really help. And I know from speaking to patients when we discuss Act4RED, they're very excited about the fact that all of these stakeholders within the space, be they clinicians, researchers, innovators, policymakers, and patients, are working towards solutions. Like, it's a solutions-oriented initiative, and that's really what we need to be doing as a global community of actors in this space. So really, we would like to thank you very much for your time. I know Bart, Hélène, and David are exceptionally busy people, and this is not your first time this week, I'm sure, providing your time to support Rare Disease Day and this initiative. We really do appreciate that, and we do appreciate the time that you give as well, behind the scenes, putting all of this together, turning up at meetings and making sure that others contribute as well to the discussion, which is really very important. We've learned a lot this evening, and I would say to those listening and those viewing this podcast, this is the start of much more information that will come related to Act4RED. This is a solutions-oriented initiative, as we have already said. We're very much at the beginning of what is a long journey, but there is so much that has been done to lay the groundwork for this initiative. And we're looking forward to bringing you more information as we move forward. And we wish you all a very happy and productive and successful Rare Disease Day 2026. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.